Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to look at callback functions. Callback functions have been there for so long in different programming languages, be it PHP, JavaScript, Java, .NET, but we are going to look at JavaScript specifically. So what exactly is a callback function? Callback function literally means a function which can be passed in as an argument from another function. One would ask, why do we need a callback function? I mean, you could have just called in this function from anywhere. So that's an important question to address. Now, to understand why we need a callback function, let us look into different ways of making requests. Broadly speaking, there are two different types of network request. There is a sync, which is synchronous, which happens in real time, called as sync request. And there is asynchronous request or async request. Sync request, as the name suggests, happens in real time. The client sends the request, server processes and responds to the request. Meanwhile, the client is just waiting for the server to respond. So there is a blocking there. The client is blocked. Now coming to the async request, the client sends the request, server responds it, and client does not wait for it. The moment client sent the request to server, it just went on doing the other task. But you would ask, how does the client know about the response, whether it's been received or not? That's where callback comes in. So while making the request, I'm saying, hey, I'm sending the request to the server and this is my callback function which will listen to the response. So whenever there's a response, my callback would take ownership of processing it. And the callback just has to take care of the responses. Now we're going to look into it with an example. Here is a quick example of callback functions. So I'll create a file called callback.js. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a simple function. Let's call it show news. What this function basically does is it would get news from somewhere and it will display it. And let's pass a callback function to it. We'll pass a function called display news. Let's define the callback function. So here I've got my callback function display news, which would take in news as a parameter, and this would just display. I'll just type in news here. That's it. Now let's go back to my show news function. I am going to pass in the callback. Now here first we are going to fetch the news. Now this news which I have fetched here will be passed to the actual callback function. I'm going to put this one here, pass news here. Let's also create function to get news. I'm going to return what the news is: heavy rainfall in Mumbai. I'm going to click on run and start debugging. So this is the output. On line number 2, it is fetching news as expected. It prints news, heavy rainfall in Mumbai. Now this is a simple example where everything is happening synchronously, but practically when you're going to fetch news from any API, there will be some delay. Now to simulate the real world scenario, I'm going to add in a delay of 1 second with the help of timeout function here. And I'm going to pass in the callback, which would be executed after 1 second. So this is the syntax. And if I want to pass in any argument, I can do so. So I need to pass in news because that's what we want to display, right? Alright, let's just comment this out because we don't need it. Now, if I execute this one, what do you think will be the output? Let's just run it. There you go. The first line is fetching news, which is correct. The second line is supposed to be this one, the news, right? But that is not the case. Why? Because it's all asynchronous. Now, callback is useful particularly in cases where you want to do some sort of processing or execution after you have received the response. Like in this case, I only want to call display news callback after I've got the news. Now, so far so good. We have seen how we can do synchronous calls, asynchronous calls, and so on. Now, what if I keep on adding callback within callback? Let's say I've got dependency between different calls, different API calls. So let's quickly simulate that scenario. I'll create a file called Callback Hell. Now here I'm going to add nested callbacks. Now within this function, I'm going to add set timeout, which will be the main timeout function. I'm going to add in a delay of, let's say, 1 second. Now what I want to do is I want to simulate API behavior by creating various levels of set timeout. Again, another function. So the function, let's give a timeout of 2 seconds here. The last time of 3 seconds. Now what you see here is the notorious callback hell, this sort of a syntax. Alright, we are going to call this function. Let's just quickly run it. Like, everything is happening sequentially. There's no problem as such, but it makes things difficult to read, and if you're making any changes, you're going to mess up. And most importantly, if you are handling errors, now this code is going to bloat up. Imagine if you're throwing exceptions, if you're catching exceptions, things are going to get messed up. We do not want to do that, and that's where we have got the promises. So check out my video on promises. What is a promise, when to use it, and how to use it efficiently. Thanks for watching.